Far from the busy streets, on the quiet edge of town, stood a small nursing home. The air inside carried the gentle aroma of fresh coffee, blending softly with the sweet scent of lavender drifting in from the garden. Sunlight poured through the windows, painting warm patterns on the polished floors. At the very end of the long, peaceful hallway was room 12. Inside, an old man named George spent most of his days. He was 82, with hair as white as winter snow, eyes that had seen decades of life, and a gentle smile that never seemed to leave his face. Every morning, George could be found in his favorite spot, a worn wooden chair placed perfectly by the window. From there, he could watch a small park across the way, where children played and autumn leaves danced in the crisp morning breeze. One quiet afternoon, the door to room 12 opened, and a young nurse stepped inside. Her name was Emily, and she was in her very first week working at the nursing home. She had noticed George's routine, how he always sat in that same chair by the window, never joining group activities or watching the television in the lounge. With a gentle voice, she asked, "Mr. George, why do you always sit here? You never seem to do anything else." George's lips curved into a warm smile as his gaze followed a little boy chasing a bright red ball outside. "Because," he replied softly, "this chair has stories to tell. And every day, it helps me remember who I am." Emily tilted her head, curiosity in her eyes. "What do you mean?" George leaned back slightly, his voice turning tender. 50 years ago, I built a chair just like this for my wife, Margaret. She loved mornings, tea in her hands, sunlight warming her face, watching the world go by. When she passed away, I kept that chair. It was the only piece of home I had left." His eyes shone with both sadness and peace. "After my stroke, they told me I could bring only one thing here. I chose the chair. Now, every morning, I sit here and talk to Margaret. I tell her about the kids, the weather, the flowers. It feels like she's still listening." Days turned into weeks, and Emily found herself visiting room 12 more and more often. She would stand by the window with George, listening to his gentle voice as he spoke about the world outside. He never mentioned the pain in his joints or the weight of loneliness. Instead, he spoke of the warmth of the morning sun, the sound of children's laughter drifting in from the park, and the fresh, earthy scent that came with the rain. Emily began to realize something. George wasn't simply passing the time, he was savoring it. Every moment, no matter how small, became a gift to him. Then, one cold winter morning, Emily walked into room 12 as usual. The room felt unusually still. George was sitting in his chair, hands resting peacefully on his lap, a faint smile on his face. But this time, he wasn't breathing. It was as if he had just heard someone calling his name and had quietly answered. Her eyes filled with tears as she approached him. That was when she noticed a small folded note tucked into the side of the chair. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Dear Emily, if you are reading this, I have gone to be with Margaret. Thank you for listening to my stories. Remember, life is not measured by the days we count, but by the moments we feel. And sometimes, the smallest things, like a chair by the window, can hold the biggest love." Emily folded the note with care and placed it back in its place. Slowly, she sat in George's chair for the first time. Outside, the children were still playing, the wind danced gently through the trees, and the world felt just a little more beautiful. From that day on, Emily began her mornings here, listening, remembering, and feeling. The days after George's passing felt different in the nursing home. The hallway to room 12 seemed quieter, the air a little heavier. Emily found herself slowing down each time she passed by, her eyes drawn to the empty chair by the window. It was still there, bathed in soft morning light, as if waiting for someone. One morning, before her shift began, Emily stepped inside the room. She stood still for a moment, hearing the faint laughter of children playing in the park. The chair seemed to call to her. Slowly, she sat down, feeling the smooth, worn wood under her hands. From this spot, the world looked different. The park across the way was alive with movement, children chasing balls, parents chatting on benches, leaves swirling in the breeze. She imagined George here, describing these little scenes to Margaret, speaking as though she were right beside him. Emily smiled through a sting of tears. In that moment, she understood what George had meant all along. The chair wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a place of connection, of stillness, of love. It was proof that even in the simplest routines, life could hold beauty and meaning. Emily made a quiet promise to herself. Every morning, no matter how busy the day ahead might be, she would spend 5 minutes in this chair, listening, remembering, and feeling. She would let the world outside remind her of what truly matters. Over time, other nurses began to notice her habit. Some asked why, and Emily would simply smile and say, "It's a good place to remember what's important." She didn't need to explain further. Months later, on a breezy spring morning, Emily sat in a chair once more. The sunlight warmed her face, the laughter from the park drifted in, and the scent of blooming flowers filled the air. She thought of George and Margaret, how their love had turned an ordinary chair into something extraordinary. And she realized something: George's gift to her wasn't just the story of the chair. It was the lesson that the smallest things, when filled with love, can outlast a lifetime. From that day forward, the chair by the window was never truly empty. Winter had always been quiet in the little nursing home, but that particular morning, the silence felt heavier than usual. Snowflakes drifted lazily past the window, settling like whispers on the bare branches outside. Emily walked briskly down the hallway, the sound of her shoes echoing softly against the walls. She carried a small thermos of tea, George's favorite. Intending to share a warm cup before her shift officially began. When she reached room 12, she noticed the door was already slightly ajar. Pushing it open, she found George sitting in his chair, exactly where she expected him to be. The sunlight filtering through the frosted glass painted a golden halo around his silver hair. For a fleeting second, everything felt normal, until she realized he wasn't moving. Her breath caught in her throat. She stepped closer, her hands trembling. George's head rested gently against the chair, his hands folded peacefully in his lap, a faint smile lingering on his lips, as if he had just heard the sweetest voice calling his name. Emily knew, without anyone telling her, that George had finally gone to be with Margaret. For a long moment, she stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes. Then something caught her attention, a small, folded piece of paper tucked neatly into the side of the chair. Her name, Emily, was written across it in George's careful handwriting. She picked it up, her heart pounding, and slowly unfolded the note. "Dear Emily, if you are reading this, I have gone to be with Margaret. Thank you for listening to my stories, for keeping me company, and for seeing me as more than just an old man in a chair. Remember, life is not measured by the days we count, but by the moments we feel. And sometimes, the smallest things, like a chair by the window, can hold the biggest love." By the time she finished reading, Emily's tears were falling freely. She pressed the note to her chest, holding it as if it were something fragile and precious. She glanced at the chair, the same chair George had kept through all the changes in his life. It no longer felt like just a piece of wood and fabric. It felt alive with the memory of his voice, his stories, and his love for Margaret. Emily placed the note back exactly where she had found it, as though returning it to its rightful place. Then, for the first time, she sat in the chair. From that vantage point, the world outside seemed to open up in ways she had never noticed before. The park was full of life, children laughing, parents talking, wind swirling through the branches. And somehow, sitting there, Emily felt George's presence, calm and warm, as if he were still pointing out the little details that made the day worth living. She whispered softly, "I'll remember, George." And she meant it. That morning, the small town was wrapped in a thin veil of mist, with pale sunlight slipping through the bare branches of winter trees. A cold wind whispered through the streets, carrying with it a stillness that made everything feel slower, quieter. Emily pushed open the door and stepped into George's familiar room. The soft scent of herbal tea still lingered in the air, as if time had paused just moments before. George was in his favorite armchair by the window, the place where he often read books and shared long conversations with Emily. But today, he didn't lift his head to greet her as he always did. The morning light fell across his kind face, and Emily realized, he was gone. A faint smile still rested on his lips, as if he had simply drifted into a beautiful dream. Her chest tightened. She stepped forward, gently taking his cold hand in hers, her vision blurring with tears. Beside him was a pale yellow envelope, with just 2 words written on it, "For Emily." Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a letter, written in the familiar, steady handwriting she knew so well. "Dear Emily. If you are reading this, it means I have reached the end of my road. Don't grieve for too long, for I have lived a full life. I want you to remember, life is not measured by the number of days we exist, but by the moments that make our hearts feel alive. Sometimes the smallest things, a warm cup of tea, a shared smile, a hand holding another, carry the greatest love. Keep living, keep loving, and never forget to seek beauty in the most ordinary things." Emily read the words again and again. Each sentence felt warm, as though George's voice was speaking to her across time. Memories flooded back, autumn afternoons spent on the porch watching leaves fall, talking about dreams, spring mornings when George patiently showed her how to care for a tiny flower pot. Those moments, so ordinary then, were now priceless. The room was quieter than ever before, yet in that silence Emily felt a new strength rising. She knew George wanted her to move forward, carrying his spirit and the love he had left behind. She gently adjusted the wool scarf around his shoulders, a silent final goodbye. Then, slowly, she opened the window. A gust of winter air swept in, carrying a few dry leaves, and suddenly the sunlight broke through, warm and golden, filling the room. Emily smiled, the same smile George always said was the most beautiful one you have. Outside, life went on. Sparrows chirped, children's laughter rang from the far end of the street, and the smell of freshly baked bread drifted from the bakery across the road. Emily knew George was still here, not in the body he once had, but in every heartbeat of life, in every moment she chose to truly feel. From that day on, whenever she sat by the window with a cup of hot tea, she imagined George sitting across from her, his eyes warm, listening as he always had. And whenever she noticed something small yet beautiful, a ray of sunlight breaking through the clouds, a wildflower growing by the roadside, a friendly greeting from a stranger, she would whisper, "I see it, George. This little thing, it's exactly what you meant." George had left this world peacefully, but his message would live on forever. Life is not measured by its length, but by the depth of every moment. The day George passed away. It was a cold winter morning, the kind where the frost clung stubbornly to the window glass, blurring the view of the quiet street outside. Emily had woken up early, as she always did, ready to start another ordinary day. She moved through the small house in silence, the only sound being the creak of the wooden floor under her feet. As she entered the living room, a sudden stillness in the air made her pause. There, in his favorite armchair by the window, sat George. His posture was relaxed, his head slightly tilted to one side, as if he had simply fallen asleep while watching the sunrise. But something in the way he sat told Emily this sleep was different. She stepped closer, her heart thudding in her chest. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful, and a faint smile rested gently on his lips. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She didn't need to touch him to know, George was gone. For a moment, she just stood there, staring, the reality of it sinking in like snow melting slowly on warm skin. The world outside continued as if nothing had happened. The soft hum of the heater, the faint chirp of a distant bird, the golden light of dawn spilling across the carpet, it all felt painfully ordinary in a moment that was anything but. On the small table beside George's chair lay a folded piece of paper, its edges worn as if it had been held many times. Emily's trembling hands reached for it. She recognized his handwriting instantly, slightly slanted, strong, yet warm. The note was addressed to her. Emily, my dear, if you're reading this, then I've already taken my final journey. Don't cry for me, I have lived a full life, especially because of you. Remember, life isn't measured by the number of days we have, but by the moments that truly touch our hearts. Sometimes the smallest things hold the greatest love. The quiet mornings, the shared smiles, the simple meals together. Those are the treasures I will carry with me. Thank you for giving me a life filled with them.